Hi, everyone. Welcome and good evening. My name is Lauren Artilles, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm thrilled to introduce this virtual event with Eileen Myles, presenting their new book, For Now, in conversation with ANDREA LAWLOR. I hope you're all well and safe. Thank you for joining us virtually tonight. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and our new digital community during these challenging times. We're hosting 5 events a week right here in our Zoom. And just like always, our event schedule will appear on our website at harvard.com, and you can sign up for our email newsletter for more updates. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, just click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get through as many as time allows. In the chat, I'll be posting a link to purchase For Now on harvard.com, as well as a link to donate in support of this series and our store. Your purchases and financial contributions make events like tonight's possible and help ensure the future of a landmark independent bookstore. So thank you for showing up and tuning in support of our authors and the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. And finally, as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings these last few months, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them as quickly as possible. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And now I'm honored to introduce our speakers. Eileen Myles came to New York from Boston in 1974 to be a poet, subsequently a novelist, public talker, and art journalist. Their 22 books include Afterglow, a dog memoir, Cool for You, I Must Be Living Twice, and Chelsea Girls. Eileen is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, an American Academy of Arts and Letters Award in Literature, an Andy Warhol Creative Capital Arts Writers Grant, 4 Lambda Book Awards, the Shelley Prize from the PSA, and a Poetry Award from the Foundation of Contemporary Arts. In 2016, Myles received a Creative Capital Grant and the Clark Prize for Excellence in Art Writing, and in 2019, they received an award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. ANDREA LAWLOR teaches writing at Mount Holyoke College, is the recipient of a 2020 Whiting Award for Fiction, and has been awarded fellowships by Lambda Literary and Radar Labs. Their publications include a chapbook, Position Papers, and a novel, Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl, a 2018 finalist for the Lambda Literary and CLMP Firecracker Awards. Paul, originally published by Rescue Press in 2017, is out now from Vintage Knopf. Tonight, they'll be discussing Eileen's latest book, For Now, a record of the forces that have shaped their prolific career as a writer, from the granular impressions of the cities that they lived in, to their relationships with friends and lovers and clashes with landlords, and especially to the relationship between writing and time, a way of inhabiting and observing chronology that informs their ability to create and love in the present moment. Kirkus Reviews calls For Now a sharply etched, unvarnished self-portrait, and NPR says, Myles has a good time journeying through hell and like a hip Virgil is happy to show us the way. And now I'm so excited to turn things over to our speakers. The digital podium is yours, Eileen and ANDREA.
Yeah. Eileen, it's so wonderful to be here with you. And thank you so much, Lauren and Harvard Bookstore, for inviting me to be in conversation with my literary hero, and on the occasion of this really beautiful and exciting new book. And I think, Eileen, you were going to read a little bit, right? Are you going to start us off by reading?
Oh, should we do that? Yeah.
Or do you want to talk first? Because I do whatever you want to do.
Maybe let's talk for a couple of minutes. Like I feel like I'm just happy to be here with you, and whose book I love so much, and we've been buddies for years, and so it's fun to be here in pseudo Harvard Square.
Yeah, I was going to say, where is here? You were.
I'm on the North Fork of Long Island. Yeah, I've been on the East Coast since the summer, like in New York and here, and so.
And you've been doing a lot of Zoom tour events.
I was Zooming in San Diego this afternoon, and then I've been doing Seattle and New York and Baltimore, hopping around. It's been a very strange way to present a book, but also kind of wonderful to just be like home, and then doing your reading tour. It's a trip. It's a whole other thing.
Yeah. What are the things that are most strange about it for you? Like, are you? Well, how is it to have people look at your space, I guess, is one thing I will ask.
Well, I know, and it's funny because on my phone, I know how to change the background, but I haven't figured that out on the, on computer Zoom screen. I'm sure I can figure that out when but it's just, I think it's kind of great to be like nakedly where you are. But generally I'm kind of either in a bedroomy office where I was earlier, or I'm in my apartment in New York, which is so funny because the book takes a lot of, is about the apartment a lot, so then I feel like I should be saying, there's the bathtub, there's the window, and so that part, I feel like this, I'm going to go to the bathroom now, but so that part is really funny, but I don't know. I think the afterwards is weird. It's weird to get excited before a reading and then just walk over to your desk and do it. And then after, I've been doing in New York, it's sort of, at least I've been often making dates with friends and stuff to go out afterwards, whether they were at the event or not, because I have that exhilarating feeling,
Yeah, the amped up feeling.
Yeah, but it's sort of like you weren't anywhere.
Right. Yeah. I was nervous before this, and I'm not even reading. And I was thinking about advice you gave me once years ago. You were talking about before reading, if you're not nervous, it's probably going to fall flat. I don't know if you remember talking about that. I think you write about that in Inferno too. And I remember, for me, that's actually super helpful. So I was like, okay, everything's going to be okay. I got really nervous. There was a fly in this small room I'm in. And I thought, oh no, there's like Mike Pence's fly is here. And it's going to be like all over, I don't know. I won't be able to think about anything else. And it's going to be a topic of conversation. And now, of course, I'm making it a topic by bringing it up.
But and I'm looking for the fly.
Right, yeah.
I'm mildly disappointed.
Listen for the fly. But yeah, I guess it's just that sort of question of, what do you do with the energy from Zoom? And we're not seeing, we know all these, like these friends and friends we haven't met yet are here. And like, what do you do with the energy of not being able to say, hey, you're here. I'm like checking the participants listing, like, oh my God, yay, hi. Do you do
it's
that?
Always surprising to see that your friends are there and your friends from all over the place. And,
so it's nice.
Yeah. But it's funny that we're just transformed by the thing too. Like, it's sort of like, at first it was so weird and now it's actually so normal. It's like when you're not doing this is when you're like, whoa, I don't want to do another Zoom. But when you're Zooming, you're just kind of like, this is reality.
Yeah, and it's delightful. For me, I'm just like, oh, more adults, like other adults besides my delightful girlfriend, but it's wonderful to have adults to talk to. And so I really appreciate a Zoom. And yeah, and I guess maybe that's also, maybe you have this as well, the sort of the effect of the quarantine on extroverts.
Which is to be kind of gross, sort of like.
I don't know. What has it been for you? I'm like desperate to connect with people. We had like the guy came to do like he came to change the oil or something early on in the quarantine. And my kid and I like stood at the window and like talked to him for like a half an hour, just desperately.
Well, it must be very funny for them too.
Yeah.
Like another one of those like lonely shut-ins.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you mostly, you haven't mostly been in New York during this period?
Well, I started off, I think I was in Texas. I went to Texas in February and the plan was to come back in the end of March and then it hit. And so I decided to stay there. So I was there, I was in Texas until July. And then in July I came back east. And so I'm now in,
That seems like good timing. Sorry, I have a boisterous cat. I'm going to try to muzzle the cat. I was wondering, actually, did you, for now, there's so much about the book in, about your apartment in the book. Mm-hmm. And I have also always, for years, I know you've talked about that apartment as being part of the condition of possibility of you having a career as a poet. So it's very interesting to read about the situation now with the gentrification and the landlord and the sort of what's going on there. But I wondered, were you writing this in New York or were you writing this in Texas?
Mostly Texas, pretending to be in New York, but then finally, because at least the initial part was this talk, like I was invited to give this talk about writing at Yale. Yeah. And it made me so uncomfortable. And it was like, the first, they sent me the other talks, they sent me the little books that they had made by the other people who gave the talk. And one was Patti Smith, and one was Nausgaard. And, I looked at the books and I was like, but then I was like, but I have to do that too. So the whole thing was very awkward. And also just the fact of writing writing about writing is a very uncomfortable thing for me, you know? And so the thing that was cool was that at the same time I had this problem with my landlord, you know, like at the same time in this apartment that I've lived in for 40 years, I get an eviction notice. And so instead of writing about writing, I decided to write about my apartment. And then when the apartment would become too much, I could shuttle back to the writing about writing. But in fact, I mean, so I guess the first part some of the first part I wrote in New York. Yeah, I think that's true. But then later I was off in Texas pretending to be in New York. And then, you know, then it got really, you know, kind of crazy.
Well, yeah. And as you say, like you don't not write fiction. I mean, you talk about,
Exactly.
right. Yeah. But I guess it's also, what I think is interesting is you say like you haven't, or maybe you didn't say you haven't, but you said like maybe there's something uncomfortable about writing about writing.
It's creepy. It's creepy.
You say it's smarmy to write like you're writing.
Exactly. You're watching yourself, you know, you're just sort of like, and then also I think it's just like, it's weird because I think all of us who are writers, we imagine one day when people will be really interested in our writing and they'll ask us questions about it and you'll go be that person, you know, but there's always somewhere in the midst of doing that, it just feels a little gross. And I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's, you know, I think it might be different from men.
I was actually thinking about that because I was thinking about how many of the writers who I admire greatly, who may have been, for instance, assigned male at birth, have got some, just like a pretty seeming like an early confidence in writing about their process and thinking that's a thing for a book. But then there's this stealth way in which you're always writing about writing.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And when you're writing about, like one of the things I really love about For Now is that you're writing about money. And I think you're always writing about money, and writing about money is writing about writing.
Yes, because you're often like counting words or anticipating what this is going to bring into your space once you push this out. So there's that funny negotiation between the inside and outside, which has a lot to do with the economy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and like class and entitlement and all of these things, and having a space to write, like this idea that the sort of like foundational trauma for you was not having your own, or losing your own space, and then that makes you a writer. Am I like giving spoilers?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the good news is that usually I read the beginning of it, and which is like me sort of standing up on my hind legs, giving the talk, you know.
Right.
Tonight I'll cut to the chase and read a later part that is slightly different, but it's sort of a little bit about Yale. So it seems, even though that I don't assume at all that the people who are listening tonight are necessarily people from Harvard, but I would just think that I thought people from Harvard, even imaginary people from Harvard, would like to laugh at Yale.
Yeah.
So that is the part that I'll be reading from. Should I read now? Maybe
yeah, totally.
Okay.
You should read. I'm going to mute myself and just listen to you.
Okay. So just by way of setup, I think at this point in the book, I think I'm talking about you know, like sometimes you're writing a book and there are parts that you've already written, you know, that you want to get into the book. And so you sort of start to make the book a space where that thing could come in, you know. And so there are these funny like meteorites that hit the earth of the book, you know, and then you have to kind of make a home for them. So I was, for a moment, I'm writing about that phenomena, and then I'll read you one of those passages. And I think when I'm talking about writing here in this book, I think I was describing it in some ways like being taught to ride a bike. Like when I was a kid, I was on a bike and my dad was running beside me, you know, getting me up. And then at some point he was gone and I was just riding. And sometimes that's what writing feels like. So like the moment I was suddenly pedaling madly now was occurring in the writing of a book, which I think of as a network of smaller and bigger rotations, producing a realistic thing, a state, a place, something anonymous, and still that actually becomes porous. And now other things, i.e. other texts and pictures, can migrate in and become citizens of the world of the book. These outer texts become inner and produce kind of a bump, like I referred to in sound recordings before, you can tell by the different fabric of this writing or assertion that it's definitely not from here, but that difference makes here real. In a way, I think it's when writing becomes a political act. Reversing the in and out. And that's what I want a lot or most in writing. It's when I'm alive. It's not my writing. It's not my writing. I'm a puppet, but my own puppet. I think I've made it clear that I never wanted to be a writer because I hadn't seen one before. It partly explains the phenomena of the book Little Women. There's a female writer inside and outside the book. It proposes for a moment that the female writer is real. So now I'm going to read this strange little piece, and it's called My Secret. And well, I think the piece will explain itself, so I'm not going to give you any more spin on it. As of fall 2017, I am interred in the Beinecke collection at Yale. What that means is that all of my notebooks since age 10 are now being sorted and filed and made available to some part of the researching public. On the occasion of being interred, I read at Yale this fall, and next fall, which is now, I will give a talk entitled How to Write. When I gave the reading at Yale, I stayed at a hotel called The Study at Yale. I drove, so I handed the keys to my car to the valet, and I didn't see it again for a couple of days. I was very tired, having driven that morning from Newark Airport. I had left my car there for a few days while I read someplace else in the US. And now I had driven here. But still, this Yale reading didn't feel like a regular gig, but more like the portraits I saw in the Philadelphia Museum of Art in the 90s when I was doing research for a play I was writing about the poet nun of New Spain, Sir Juana Inés de la Cruz. The museum had a portrait that was a copy of the only known portrait of her. I wanted to look at it. But to get to it, they first rolled out several other portraits of young women with piles of flowers on their heads in white dresses. These were wedding portraits of women who were entering the convent, and their portraits had been painted because they would never again be seen by their families. They were each marrying God, or maybe a building, the convent. Secretly, they were marrying each other. So I felt a little that way about the reading at Yale, the entire enterprise. I was marrying Yale, or my papers were, or my writing history was. This was the beginning of the end. I read in a very beautiful room on the second floor of the library. It was a building made out of very thin marble. Light came in from outside, but not that much light. It was thin stone, so it was a little bit like being buried alive. There was a nice big audience there, all friendly and happy to see my burial. I think sure many of them might have thought I was just reading rather than truly understanding what was behind the ritual. I read from all over my poetry life, young poems, recent ones. My selected poems had just come out just a few years ago, so I was used to reading from old work, but this was different. Now I wanted to do a good full scan of the corpse. People liked it, and afterwards I went out with some of the archivists and Karen, who is John Ashbery's biographer. I knew John, and she did too, but differently. She knew John. What hell to be a biographer, but I guess what purgatory it is to be me, part interred, the rest still alive and creating more fodder to be placed in folders, filled away to be installed. I love the archivists. They were all smart and weird and spoke about the archivists before them who were really weird. One in a likable way and one in a very mean, unlikable way. They talked about no matter how much scholars read about a poet, and this archive is mainly poets, it's a poet's graveyard. What researchers really want to know is who the poet fucked or what the poet fucked, probably how they fucked. And you know, honestly, it's one of the main things I write about in my notebooks, my fucking, my needing to fuck, my needing to stop fucking. And I continue to keep notebooks. It's how I started writing, and it's really nothing but ironic. I had no space in my life as a child. It's the trauma of my life. I had a lovely sunny room when I was a child, and then my sister was born, and I was moved across the hall to a large, dark, shared room. My room sat over there across the hall, the bright one, for as long as I lived in the house. And now that light held my brother, a boy. He had the sun, he had the privacy. Nothing much happened in there for 10 years. And then I was given a greasy black insurance company diary. It had a moose head on the cover in gold, and it said 1960. And I began. It was my place. In about 5 years, I went for the first time in my life on a vacation with my aunt and her family, and neither my sister nor my mother nor my brother came. My dad was already dead. It was just me and my aunt and my cousin. I had my own room, and my room didn't have a good reading lamp, but the hall did, so the room was largely for lying naked on my bed like I had never done before in my life. And the hall was for me sitting under the overhead light with my latest little diary, say 1963. So only 3 years later, not 5, and I would write my life into it. I didn't have sex yet, but when there was sex, boom, there, onto these pages it would go. And I've been pouring for years. Nobody's going to ask the archivists if I had sex or who I had sex with. I just received a galley in the mail from a young writer who admires my work. In fact, in the galley, they describe me as their hero. But they are, in fact, researching the writer Carson McCullers. The writer of the galley is a lesbian, and she believes Carson McCullers is also one. So she has been reading her letters and transcriptions of her therapy sessions and pieces of her mostly redacted memoir, all in search of the evidence that Carson McCullers is, in fact, a lesbian. That wouldn't be the problem with me. I'm so obviously a lesbian, I don't even call myself a lesbian anymore. I say queer or trans. I say they, but none of that matters. There is just no sexual mystery. The researchers will just be sitting there turning the pages of my composition notebooks, hundreds of them, 57 years of them. And did I say I started having sex in 1965? Did I start writing about it yet? I guess there are some questions. My father died in 1961, and I did not write about that. Guess I didn't think it was worthy of mention. But I suspect I began to write about sex at some point. And then it was just blatantly clear for years. I was having it, I wasn't having it, it was good, it was lousy. We were breaking up, there was no one, there was someone new. On and on for years. If I've made it so easy, what would they be researching? My work? The last woman I dated made me promise I wouldn't write about her. I'm sure she meant, don't write about having sex with me. I said, no, of course not. Then I said, well, there's actually only one way I can really make that promise. The joke was that I only write about people after we break up. So if she stayed with me forever, no problem. But that isn't true. I was always writing about her in my notebook, and people will be sitting at a table at Yale reading about her. Somehow that makes me more comfortable than thinking of people turning page after page of my sex life and my sadness, my ambition, and my shame. I like thinking that I'm betraying somebody else in the future with my notebook rather than the more depressing thought that I'm betraying myself. I began writing to have some space, some privacy, and the end result is that all those years of thoughts and desires and worries and feelings being baldly open to the world, overly naked like that first bedroom I was in. Anybody that can flash a university ID or a flimsy cover letter from some journal can sit down and be slightly amused and disgusted by my sex life for years. In fact, they can do that while I'm still alive. I'm hoarding the last couple of years. It feels like just by being alive and still writing, I'm hoarding. This most recent ex could conceivably go and read about herself if I allow the current notebooks to enter into the crypt with my name on it. But I will not do that. But it doesn't feel the same anymore. The dirty kick of being alone is gone. Sitting on the plane, writing into my black and white composition notebook, I could really give a shit if the person next to me is reading what I write over my shoulder. I'm already writing now as if somebody was reading me. Why not that clod over there? I had imagined when I thought about writing this piece about archives that I would pop some of my current journal in right here, just like a little trailer for my dead future. The girlfriend before the most recent ex was actually very excited about being in Yale. She loved that that was where our love would go. I hadn't even sold my archive to them yet, and she was thrilled. It was like she was already in the future in the crypt, more excited about being there with me than the me here we shared a couple of years ago. There was this very beautiful picture she gave me of herself as a young mother nursing her child. There was this big tit the kid was sucking on. And interestingly, those tits had been reduced, actually discarded, before I ever met her. I had never met those tits. She gave me that photo and I gave it to Yale. Ha, I thought, I'll give them your tits. The more the secrets are theirs, somebody else's, not mine, the better I feel about the whole thing. And yet something is hidden. What could it be? I will never breathe a word. That's it.
Oh my God. It's so weird. I feel like it's a private reading, like you're privately reading to me.
It
It's
actually
like,
feels that way. No, it's very funny.
right, without seeing everybody. I'm really enjoying that fantasy. Wow, yeah, I'm so interested in this idea that you're already writing as if somebody is reading you, like it's changed how you're writing in your notebooks.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're reading that. I mean, the sort of like the relentlessness of the sort of like meta narrative here it's so interesting. Someone is reading you right now or listening to you read you. There's a lot. I'm having like a time travel feeling about that.
Well, the thing that's funny about that, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been naked in public, but one of the things that's true about it.
Many years ago.
Yeah. Well, then you start to forget that you're naked.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the thing that's true about writing in notebooks and feeling like, oh, these are just going to go there and somebody's already reading it, that the feeling actually fades. I mean, it's just like COVID, it's like what we're all going through now. We're all like, when will this be over? And then we also think this will never be over.
Right.
And so I think the thing about writing as if somebody's already reading you, and I think that a career does that too. You're sort of already in the hands of somebody in the future and wondering how this, it's sort of like that starts to be what writing feels like. And then after a while, you stop giving it those characteristics and it's just your practice, even though it is different and it always will be different.
Yeah, like for you, did something shift after, like, where was it for you? Like after you had your first book, or like, was there a particular book where that shifted for you, where I'm just wondering if, like, when you became like you say in the new bio, it says something like public talker, but when did that tip over? I mean, I know that's different from the archives thing, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a big way, I think when Chelsea Girls got reissued and when my Selected came out and I got a lot of attention, so it was 2016. So it was.
Oh wow.
Everything was different then.
But so you feel like you actually were protected from that until then?
Yes and no, because I think every time a book comes out, you have all these expectations, and so you go through the ritual of the readings and traveling and reception and some things happen that you anticipated and some things don't happen that you anticipated, so that you're in a new world, but it's not the one you imagined, and it's a little different, and then it continues to be the same world, but the different same world. So there was a way in which it just like, oh, it's still me writing a book, and it's still me writing a book with these various ambitions and then these ways of discarding these ambitions and just writing the book. But I would say I think it's changed again though. I mean, I think in 2016, suddenly it actually was a different world because I felt like I was constantly, I was being interviewed a lot. You probably felt this too. It's like suddenly you are that guy.
Yeah, but I mean, not like you're like Eileen Myles, like, I don't know what that's like. That's gotta be like, you are like, you're Eileen, but you're also Eileen Myles, right? Like there's this element there where it's like you're writing as if you have to start thinking you're writing as if someone's reading you because of the archives. But there's also this way in which, like, I mean, as long as I've been reading your work, I think your presence has been a big part of it. And it's sort of like, how do you be a person when you have that presence also?
Right, right, right. Well, I think the thing is, I mean, obviously, this is the this is the person speaking now. What's interesting is I think at some point you realize that is a problem. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think all of us, it's like, I mean, I had a conversation earlier today, and we were talking about the fact that when you're younger, I mean, I did things often thinking, I can write about this. You know, like often, no matter how bad something was, I thought, well, I can write about it, you know? And then there was a certain point when I realized no matter what I write, that experience was not worth, you know, but there was just this kind of, this activity of kind of creating behavior to be copied by you later and it becoming your work, you know? And so there was this kind of strange belief in, this value in copying your life and that being almost your excuse or your, I mean, in a way that's what this book talks about. It's sort of like, it's almost like the writing becomes your alibi for existence, this uncomfortable existence, you know? And it's like the writing will justify that. The writing will make, you know, and stuff. And but the thing that's so interesting, and I think we all struggle with that as writers in some way, or maybe that's maybe too much of an assumption about what other people think. But at some point you realize, but these actually are my experiences. You know what I mean? Like that terrible thing that happened to me, or how, you know, or my dad dying, or these various things. I was just like, but writing about it doesn't mean that I've dealt with it. It just means that I wrote about it, you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that you're still left with the human burden of thinking, oh, that happened to me though. And I have to sit with this. And so it's kind of like the opposite of an out of the body experience. It's like trying to summon the spirit back in and say, wait a second, you're that kid.
Yeah, and like you write about it, and it's not like, oh, now you learned your lesson, now you've metabolized everything, right? Like
right.
it's like you wrote about it, you had the whole experience of, as you say, copying it, and then it's still there. Maybe it's like transmuted, but it's still there. You have to deal with it.
And strangely, it's sort of like part of the conceit of writing about it is that you write about dealing with it in some way.
Right.
Maybe not too much of that,
You
but there's
do.
a little bit of it.
Well, that's one of the things I love in, you know, about when you included that, you're talking about that piece you read, you know, about Yale and the archives. That was a piece that you wrote, and then it got kind of orphaned, right? And so then you rescued it by putting it in the book, and then there's all these other things that are sort of like lost. Like there's this really painful, for me, really painful moment in the book that sort of, actually it's not a moment, it's like a thread through the book of a lost box and the mystery of that. It's like a totally gripping up all night murder mystery. What happened to the box? You're gonna have to read the book to find out. And it reminds me, you know, of that. See, that's the bookseller coming out. But for real, I was just like, what happened to the box? And I think that is just this idea that there are some things that you've lost and you have no access to, and some things that there are maybe stories you're saving. And then there are the things that you're sort of like, you say you're saving, but you're writing in the notebook and you're going to send it to the archive and maybe people are going to read it. You know, there are some questions coming into the chat that I feel like are the kinds of questions we should just jump into. Like Ariana has a question, and I feel like I should read it to you now.
Can I say one thing though, because what we were just saying, which is that, which I think the difference between writers and visual artists is visual artists make these things and they sell them. But writers, in some ways, I feel like writers lose these things.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it's sort of like, it's almost like our job is to create a void, you know? And I'm just, that's as far as I can get with that.
No, it's like,
we don't make it
terrifying.
It's the opposite of it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. You think, oh, I'll write it down and I'll save it. I'll have it forever. I mean, I thought that with the, you know, first and only book I've written. I was just like, well, I just put everything in it, and then I won't forget anything ever.
Right.
Like that was like part of my project. It will be an archive.
Exactly.
That doesn't work, it turns out.
No.
now. I have so many feelings about that lost box. One time, actually, when I lived in San Francisco, I left an apartment, a beautiful apartment, maybe a little precipitously, and there were some boxes in a basement storage space, and I didn't go back promptly to get them, and they were thrown out by the landlord, as will happen.
Mhm.
And then maybe you will appreciate this, I made a list of all the things that I lost.
Ah, yeah.
And I had the list for a long time, like years. I had that list, and it was like on my wall, and I would keep adding to it when I would remember, oh yeah, that book was in that. And then I lost the list.
Right. It's
No, but that really happened.
Yeah. Huh?
That really happened, though. It's not even a punchline. Okay.
I know. I just feel like it's the story of every writer is we lost something.
So I'm going to read Ariana's question because
Yes.
right. It's Ariana. Hi, Andrea. Hi, Eileen. Hi, Ariana. Adoring this private reading, naked in public with you.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question about what we have heretofore understood as public space vis-a-vis public talker. The level of hostility that exists in hostility that exists in public is, I think, higher than in any of our lifetimes. Like the level of hostility now, I'm thinking, what's it mean to be naked in public now? What even is public? I don't know the answers to these questions, so I don't expect you to answer them, lol. LOL. I lay them at your feet with love. XO.
Ah, God, that is such a weird,
right?
Ariana question.
That is very on the nose. I love that question.
Yeah. What does it mean to be naked in public now? I think we have we're foregoing that right now. I think that's what's weird about this moment, because nakedness, I think, presumes something about the body and the body exposed. And, we all have these special, like an artist friend had an opening a few weeks ago. And what it meant was that you would kind of trickle into the gallery and then meet at the park across the street,
Oh, wow.
So that was sort of amazing. And so I think there are these rituals outside, but I think largely there is no opportunity to be naked in public, and I think it does relate somewhat to this thing that we're working in the place where we're already traumatized by. I mean, like, I think we're all, like with social media, it's this amazing thing, and we get to share this news and learn these things, but we also get to get our asses kicked when we say the wrong thing or be outraged at somebody else. And there's so much violence in that space, And so I think what's interesting is that this pandemic has nonetheless made these vulnerable bodies become absent, and we only have this. And in some weird way, I feel like we're starting to, I don't know, make some peace with these other bodies that we've been kind of cobbling, I think, for, say, since the 90s. We've been transporting ourselves, but we always had that other place, and suddenly we don't have that. And I think we're having to make peace with this, and it just like anybody who, it's so interesting that Trump refuses to have a Zoom.
My God.
Date. It's really crazy because his body, we don't want that body naked in public, sending out viral viruses, It's so strange.
Really
He's in total denial of the fact that something has shifted, and so there's a way in which it's so strange. It's like, at least this is our truth, and we have to find each other in here somehow. If that.
Yeah, that seems like such a good, there's a lot of other questions I'm going to start asking of you, but I love that. And I also just, that idea of like, what is it to be naked in public now? I just want to add one thing, which is like, I think, who would have predicted that showing each other our weird rooms? Like, you want to see me naked in public? It's my towels.
Right.
It's sort of like this carefully staged room. Now I was naked. I could take this off, but really that's nothing compared to showing you my towels.
And that's a great joke. Once we all realized that who became famous on the internet was cats. Suddenly everybody saw cats for the
Is
first time.
is it my cat is making you think that?
No,
My
no,
cat's
no.
screaming. Okay,
No,
sorry
but
everybody.
you know, you would never see cats before until we were all like online and showing pictures of cats on
Totally.
Instagram and stuff. But now we are all cats.
Now we're all cats.
Yeah.
The next question is,
Yes.
this is, oof. Eileen, did you read Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl? If so, what did you think about it? And I know, right? Like,
Yes.
No,
I read Paul. I love this question though. I read Paul so early on. I read Paul in a manuscript. I went so nuts for it. I remember I told my, friends in TV that I was like, this is the book. Read this book. And they were like, they did what they all do. And they go, yeah, okay. And, didn't read it, but I was the second I read, because I've known you for a while and I knew of your interest in mythology, and you did a zine about mythology and stuff. And suddenly
you were in it.
Huh?
You were in it.
Yeah. And then suddenly you merged your contemporary existence with mythology and made a novel, The Odyssey. There it is.
Eileen made a video. This is a DVD.
Right.
They used to put movies on them.
Right.
Eileen has a movie on this.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate Eileen. The book wouldn't exist without you. Like you reading that manuscript and then like the notes you wrote me. I mean, everything, your encouragement was that tipped it over the line. I feel like that was, I really do consider you my benefactor. That I'm going to make you stop talking about my book. It says, which is your favorite favorite of Eileen's work? So I'll just say the sentimental favorite. It's not me. It's my sentimental favorite. It was The Gateway Drug, but every book is my favorite. And also Inferno. I think Inferno was like, how do you be like a grown-up queer artist? And Inferno is one of my favorites. They're all my favorites. So take that, anonymous
thank you.
questioner who, I love you, I probably know you. Ariana says something very sweet as well. Kat, do you think that writing about something that has happened in one's life before processing it can be an act to rupture the apprehension to process it?
Huh. No, I don't know. I wanted to say that, I don't know, process it. I think the question makes, I have a lot of questions about the question, because I wonder, do we mean processing it as a human being or processing it as a writer? Because often I'm writing about things that I don't understand, but I know what they have, I know what they're made of. I know what textures they are. Or often I'm writing about something that when it happened, I didn't understand it at all. And so I'm downloading the pictures of my childhood, say, but now I have the capacity to write a score to it or a voiceover and say what I think is happening. But in a way, I think, processing is just an ongoing thing that happens at different paces and at different levels of comprehension at all these points in your life and at all these points in your writing. So that I never think you never quite get it right. It's always off in some new way,
Yeah.
That's what I got.
I love that. That seems right to me. I mean, I'm going to ask you another question.
Okay.
Alexa Weinstein says, hi to you both from a backyard in Portland, Oregon. Hey.
Hello.
Yards, awesome. I always thought of painters as losing their work. There's only one, off it goes, and writers getting to keep our work forever. So many copies. You flipped it. Can you talk more about how writers create a void? Thanks for this whole thing.
Oh, wow. I mean, I just think we empty out every time we write something too. And also you're kind of making a void of your current existence. I mean, I think people had problems with language when it was first invented. They were like, where's the memory going to go? How are people going to remember things if we can now copy things down through writing and make books? I think language just changed everything. And it's very strange and interesting that we as writers are people who have decided to make our lives out of that act of change. I mean, it's very interesting to say that to you, whose work is so about this. But yeah, I mean, I just think that that, I mean, I think that's the problem of being a writer, is that you are engaging symbolically, you know, all the time. And by saying Diet Coke, I make some, I mean, it's like, it's, then there's a copy and then there's a bottle. And in some ways I start to attach more to the language than I do to the actual cold, slowly emptying bottle, you know? So I think there's a way in which it really causes us to abstract ourselves, you know? And I think that's a kind of loss where I just, you know, it's like, it's crazy what painters do. They just get in these rooms and they listen to music and they pile, I mean, they make more. They just make more, you know, and then they can listen. And you must have had people tell you that, I love your book. I listened to it while I was painting or when I was driving cross country.
I'm so jealous of painters like Zyler, Jane, you know, my world favorite painter of all time, listens to so many audiobooks. I'm just like, whoa, you just read so much. And it's like, you know, painting.
Yeah, no, it's like they're just more and more. It's like a big wedding cake, and I just feel like we're like less and less. And
I know,
less.
taking words out. Vanessa Arico asks, Eileen, hearing you read is such a big part of reading you. I am with you, Vanessa. It totally changes my reading experience, being able to hear your voice and carry it with me when I'm reading you alone. How much does reading aloud figure into your writing? Has voice always been a thought / part of the writing process for you?
Well, I think when I started writing, I couldn't figure out what the organizing principle was, or who to be, or how to, I don't know, there was something about writing that I didn't get. And when I started to think about it as speech, I suddenly completely knew how to do it. You know, and I think speech is often a place where I just feel like, oh, I should have said that. I should, you know, why didn't I say that? Why didn't I open my mouth? You know, but it's like writing is the place where I do open my mouth, you know? And so there's that. But the thing, for me, at least, I mean, I never read my work out loud until I'm in public. I have no relationship to
really
the sound of my work. I hear it. I mean, I write it and I hear it.
You don't like read it out loud to edit?
No, I don't want to hear this. Wow. Yeah, not at all. Yeah, I can't. It's like, even, especially with poems, it's sort of like a new poem. I'm so excited about standing in front of an audience and reading it for the first time because I've never heard it and I don't know what it sounds like. And I don't know what its body feels like on my body, you know? So it's just like, you know, it came out of me. So I have some feeling about it and I project a sound, I think, but I don't hear. It's not mine, you know. It's weird. It's
so weird to me because I think like Vanessa, I mean, like when I read when I read For Now the other day, last week, whenever I read it, I was like, oh, this is awesome hanging out with Eileen, you know. And it was just like your voice was right there. I just had this feeling of you speaking to me through the words on the page, and that's so wild. I would not have expected that.
The fun part, you probably know this too. There's nothing more fun than making an audiobook.
I'm not famous enough to get to make one. They didn't let me do it.
Did somebody else read it?
Yeah, they got a really awesome non-binary voice actor, Danny Martinovic, who's really cool, like really awesome voice actor. And I was like psyched, and I talked to the producers and everything, but they were just like, yeah, you're not gonna read that. And I was like, okay.
That's amazing. It's really fun. I
feel like I would like it though.
To hear the whole book and to be with it, and even you have this funny relationship with the sound engineer where they're your audience. It's like this, you know, it's like a plate glass and they're over there with your headphones on and you're like grooving in your radio station. And it's very funny work, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to read the next question because it's from Jordy, which is hilarious. Jordy's actually asking a lot of questions. Jordy. Yay. Jordy says, Andrea, buddy, that's a lot of towels. Okay, you know, correct. Arranged very orderly. Do you or Eileen want to reflect a little bit on the relationship between urges toward order and disorder in the writing process?
Oh.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I think the first draft is disorder. it's wild disorder. And I think it's really exciting when you find order within it. Like every now and then I was like, okay, I'm on a groove, but often I just feel like I'm just shooting off into space and, you know, covering paper and just making the book have a body, you know, and then with this idea that I'll take away and carve and, you know.
Yeah.
I think this is probably directed at you as well. I think you need to answer. You want
No,
to
I mean, I don't think my answer would be very, I mean, I have some compulsions towards order.
Mhm.
I would like for things to be orderly, and there is constant disorder in my experience. I mean, that was certainly my experience of writing Paul, was that I kept trying to order things, and things would, you know, what was the little orphans? What was your word for the
Lucky orphans?
plucky orphans? Yeah, I mean, I kept having things that were like, people would just say things like, why does that have to be there? Or you have to cut that. And I would be like, no, I can't do it. And I can't explain why, you know?
Yeah.
So it would be like, that's like disorder, I guess. Like I would have this like, yeah, that would for me be the answer to that.
Right.
I just want to hear you answer questions, Eileen. I'm sorry. Don't be mad. This is from an anonymous attendee. Hearing your specific strain of Massachusetts accent is a special form of time travel for this lifelong New Englander.
Mm-hmm.
What would be different in your writing if it also had / could have / vibed off that accent? It matters to me hearing your voice, but maybe it's a local preference.
No, I'm not sure I understand the question. What is the question?
I'm not sure I understand it either, but I guess it's what would be different in your writing if it vibed off I feel like your writing does vibe off your accent.
Yeah, that's what I think I really write. I mean, it's weird because when I do readings, I just hear Boston come pouring up. It's sort of like, it's like when I go home or something. It's just like, I can't, I mean, in a way, it feels like I make jokes about it like this. It's like the Boston accent is like the wah-wah pedal, you know, that I feel it happening and then I work it, you know, and but it is, I think I really write in a Boston accent. And I felt that about, you know, the late poet Robert Creeley. I think we dug that about each other, is that we knew we wrote Massachusetts accents. And when John Wiener, is it's just the Boston writers, that it's just like when he goes, and you think I could care? And it was just like that duck mouth, like care, you know,
Totally.
It's just like the A and the R just don't, they just go into infinity together. And it's just like language got invented for me and you know, pretty much in Harvard Square, you know. It's just like, it's a trip to, when I spent a month in Massachusetts, like in 2016, and what I felt was most moving was to look at street signs and realize that I had learned to read in Cambridge. And so when I saw Trowbridge Street, I was like, you know, it was like every street sign went right into my body, because I was that little bird trying to say those words for the first time reading. You know? It was like, where you learn to read is really important.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually freaking me out about my own kid. This is from Daniela Sandoval. Hi, Andrea. Oh, hi, Eileen. Hi, Andrea. I'm a queer teen girl writing from Tijuana, Mexico. Love you both. Well, we love you. Can I speak for you? I find that I'm always operating bilingually through the world, feeling everything through Spanish and English. Do you guys experience a sense of duality like that in any sense?
That's a really good question. I mean,
Really
I
question, yeah.
I very much envy your reality, because I've always wished I was bilingual, but I feel like I'm such a lazy American that I've not made that happen in my life so far.
Well,
but
hard same over here.
Yeah, but I think, no, I mean, the question makes me feel something very familiar, though I'm having a hard time putting my finger on it. I mean, even queerness, I would say, it's sort of like, I feel like I operate out of this queer place, though I don't always want to talk about it in the writing, but I feel like it's you know, it's ruling the mix in a lot of ways. And it's always a question of when to play it and when to not play it, you know? That's a hard question. I mean, I think that's in a way, I still feels like a glib answer for I mean, I think if the question is about in the writing, I just think sometimes it's like I don't know whether to say something. I know that something is guiding something I'm writing, and I don't know when to put it front and center. Like something can very much be the subject and still be not what I'm talking about. And I'm always waiting to when I get to it, and sometimes worried that I won't get to it, and or get to it too fast and kind of ruin the kind of, because the flow, I think writing is the flow, not anything else in a way. So even this idea of subject matter is sort of a myth, it's just, there's just the way you're laying it out that is this recreation of a world,
Totally. I'm just trying to think if I have anything that relates even a little bit. I think for me, the one thing I would say is, having taken a long time to write a thinly veiled autobiographical first novel, I think the duality for me that has been most present in my writing has been the sort of sense of the person that the thinly veiled autobiographical novel is about is very different from this guy, And so it's sort of like, for me, that kind of like duality of the person I was in my, teens and 20s and the person now, at 49, is really, really, really different. And so I think that sort of like holding both of those things, like the sort of like, I still am that person because time is flat or, layered in these weird ways, and it's not real. And it's like, it's 1993 and 2020 right now. Yes. But also it's sort of like one thing comes to the fore, one thing goes back. And that to me is, I think, that's all I have, but we have not that much time left, but a lot of really great questions. I'll take a couple more, or?
Yeah, I just want to say quickly that I think the thing we were talking about way back about the difficulty of personal identity, I mean, this is very similar to what you were just saying, and the act of writing is maybe the biggest one, that it's sort of like, you're not exactly writing about yourself, you're doing something else. And it's sort of like sometimes the self comes in and it just becomes actually not very interesting. It's just like, it has a weight that is not what the truth is,
Yeah. I'm always telling students, like, we're going to do this thing where we say like the speaker, even though, it's a first person narrator in a creative nonfiction piece writing about their name, and their name is the same as your name. And it's like, we're going to say the speaker. And it's like, okay, so that's like, it's a fiction, but it's also actually, it's true. It's an
instrument. It's not an identity.
I'm just going to go down. Ooh, okay. Emma Cohen asks, hello to the both of you from Middlesex County. Hello.
That's where we are.
That's where you are.
Are
you there?
No, the bookstore is.
Oh, okay, yeah. Is that where we are? We're at Harvard Bookstore right now. I'm in Franklin County, so what do I know? I have a question for both of you. How do you think queer literature has changed / transformed since the beginning of your career to present day? I'm going to let you handle that one because my career just kind of began.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that. I mean, it's a very obvious thing to say, but it's more diverse. It's more, there's more kinds of, there's more flavor, there's more kinds of queerness and transness and kind of literary styles with which to speak it through. I mean, I think that it seemed like a smaller world when I began, and even there was more debate about what it meant to talk about your gender and sexuality in the work, and people would say you should talk about it or you shouldn't talk about it. And, there was more. I mean, and I think now that just as many approaches as there are people and writers, it's really grown in this I think very rich and beautiful way.
Totally. Yeah.
But I will still say that it's, I think, interesting. I still think that it's much more of it remains, I think, in some ways a great problem to be a queer writer to the larger culture. I think you remain that as a thing, And it's like, you know, it's a blessing and a you know, a rich reality, but I think it still is a big problem culturally. You know, we're not.
Yeah, and it's a creative problem. I see that too. I think, well, I will just say one thing that I think, you know, when I first started reading queer books and watching queer movies and all this, you know, there were so few texts relative to what there are now, that it's like you were sort of forced to have a really sort of omnivorous aesthetic. You had to, you know, you would take in the experimental and the, you know, sort of like literary realist, and you would just be exposed to everything because you were just dying for like queer stuff. And now you could just spend your whole, you could just read like really, you know, you could read like avant-garde trans poets and like not run out, which is pretty amazing. And then also just like less of a grab bag. I don't know. That's all. I don't have anywhere to go with that. I think that Lauren is suggesting that we have like one more question, which I feel, oh, God, it's too hard. I want to hear you answer all of these. I'm just gonna. Okay. I'm gonna say this question here, from Phil Sinitiere. I'm sorry if I've mangled your name, Phil, and I'm sorry for that. Thanks so much for this conversation. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate your reference to Jen Shaplin's book. On the one hand, her memoir about Carson McCullers is in a certain way about scarcity of / in archives. And your comment about the writer's job to create a void perhaps ironically creates the conditions for the possibility of archival abundance with a prolific writer such as yourself. I wonder if you can comment about the relationship between archival scarcity and archival abundance in and through your process of writing / thinking / speaking.
God, I don't know what to do with the archival scarcity part. I'm not sure I know what that means. Maybe does that mean loss? And I guess that, you know, I think that the great news at the end of the road is that it's sort of like the abundance is the process itself. You start to stop fetishizing the actual archive and start to fetishize the, you know, the whatever the thing is that is the excited relationship to language that keeps the thing flowing and happening. You know, I mean, that's just, I think that's the through line, the fact that it's happening, you know, and that it doesn't matter. What you make is kind of dross, you know, the act of making it is what's ecstatic, you know, and is real, I think.
Well, maybe for you, to read it is not to read dross, you know, and that's what's so interesting. I feel like you are like a poet of abundance. And so maybe that's why you didn't want to talk about the scarcity.
Yeah, well, the scarcity, it's like it comes up on you. You think, whoa, it's over. But that was just that piece, you know.
I feel like, all right, there's great questions. Maybe we'll, you know, talk about them another time, because I think that that it's probably time to say goodnight to everybody, and also to suggest that everybody buy a book from, or like 10 from Harvard Bookstore.
Please.
Because we want to keep all our bookstores alive.
Yeah, exactly. Andrea, thank you so much. And Lauren, where you are.
Thank you.
Thanks for making this happen. Yeah.
Thank you both. I just want to thank you both, Eileen and Andrea, for this absolutely illuminating conversation. It was a joyful way to spend my Friday night. And I want to thank all of you out there for spending your night with us. Yes, please learn more about this incredible book and purchase For Now, and also Andrea's book, Politics of the Former Mortal Girl, at harvard.com. And on behalf of Harvard Bookstore here in Cambridge, Mass., have a good weekend. Keep reading and stay safe. Cool. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night.
See you on the internet.